So I thought I'd get into costume for this one. Totally wasn't just recording another video or anything like that. One of the next questions I got was a much more broad one, so I have no idea how long we're going to be talking here. That question was, how is the magic, the technology, and the magic technology in Primus, in both a military and a civilian aspect? There's a thing called weaving in Primus. It is a manner by which you weave magic directly into an object in order to produce a result. This form of magic is effectively replacing technology in this world. There is also magic, as in what you cast. Now, with very few exceptions, magic is something that can be taught, although I liken it unto higher studies and very difficult intellectual things, such as, for example, neurosurgery. This is not something you can learn easily. On average, it takes about 2 to 3 years of constant studying at a university, and you still have to be good at it. You have to apply yourself in order to learn black magic. It takes closer to 5 to 6 years in order to learn yellow magic, and 8 and up years with no upper cap in order to learn white magic. So if you're going to be a white mage, black mage, you're going to have to put your character on hold for a couple of years in order to go learn that, and I have been adamant about that point. Because that's the way magic works. That's the way magic works in Primus. It can be taught, and indeed, anyone can learn to be a mage. But it takes careful study, application, time, skill, and of course the resources to be able to continue existing while affording your tuition fees in order to actually learn these skills. There's an individual I was doing a thing for recently who was a prodigy, a brilliant individual who only took 8 years in order to learn how to cast White Mage, in order to become a level 1 White Mage. And he was a prodigy, someone who was innately skilled and talented. Just to really make my point here. Now, now there are other types of mages, but those are the types you can learn. There is a red mage. Red mage is a little bit different. A red mage is someone who's insane, basically. There are very few red mages. And as you can tell by the way I said it, black mages are more common than yellow mages. Yellow mages are more common than white mages. White mages are very rare. White mages are more common than red mages. A red mage is someone who has learned in multiple schools, usually black and white, although yellow is an option as well, and who also has some martial prowess as well, who is trained with military training with weapons, armor, and how to properly use them, how to carry themselves, that kind of a thing. It's one of the reasons why I basically require a pretty good backstory in order to play as a red mage for a player character, and it's why the characters have encountered basically no red mages in the entire party, because they're super rare. Then, of course, there are green mages. I've talked about these a little bit before, and we'll probably talk about this if we ever do an episode just about the elements. Green mages are summoners. It cannot be taught, period. There's no way to learn it. It has to be something you are innately born with. You may not discover it till later, but you are born a green mage. And then there's blue magic. No one's really 100% sure what blue magic is. They know that it can cause some interesting effects, and that's about it. And then there's violet mages. Now, the party has actually encountered one violet mage. That's Gerlin himself. And really, that's probably all I need to say about what exactly a violet mage can do. For record, I have this joke saying, well, if you convince me, I'll allow you to play a blue mage or a violet mage. But no one's ever succeeded at convincing me, because you're not allowed. You're not allowed to play those. Those are designed to be super overpowered classes, both in lore and in gameplay. To give you a couple of examples, stat-wise, a blue mage automatically gains triple anything they do with weaving. A violet mage automatically gains something like quadruple the standard health and attack roll and damage, and they gain SR and DR naturally, just for existing. Also, violet mages gain the ability to express magic directly, and of course also get a huge weaving bonus, etc, etc. They are very overpowered classes, and they're designed to be. I could also probably name on 2 hands all the violet and blue mages that exist in the entire setting. At least the ones that are alive right now. I suppose the party has actually encountered 2 violet mages, or at least a piece of the second violet mage, the Turmeric gentleman that I mentioned at some point in the past. But I digress. So, that's how magic works in general. Magic is, of course, based on the 8 elements. It does its own thing. It scales with your level and your ability to cast it. Blah, 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 blah. Let's talk about the more, setting building aspects of magic. If you go down the street, you will see, at night, it will be lit. It will be lit because there are these crystalline shards that have been specifically woven to emit light, usually sometimes carved directly out of magicite, which I'll talk about in a minute. These things emit light. They can be used to cool food, to heat food in order to cook it. They are used to preserve things. Again, food. I keep talking about food, but they do. They help preserve food. They help for transportation and the like in order to facilitate trade and to help areas that have less food. They can be used to purify water. They can be used to break down and reduce waste from either, from people or from other things, industrial level kind of things. They can be used to move objects, matter, people, energy. Weaving has basically replaced technology in this setting. If you were to remove magic and the weaving thereof in this world, they would be very, 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 very basic. I mean, these people know how to make fire and how to do basic smithing, but for all intents and purposes, basically everything they do is weaving. Now, there are mundane crafts, don't mistake, but it is, again, basic medieval level technology, something that is very, very, very flawed and requires a ridiculous amount of time and effort to actually do. Even people who do mundane crafts, like smiths and tailors and whatnot, also use weaving to augment that. Woven tools, woven items. Picture a smith who has an anvil that every time he brings the hammer down with an item on it, it naturally shifts a little bit of energy into the item they're weaving so that it makes it more malleable quicker. And then they have another woven tool over here which takes place of the basin of water or whatever, which then hardens it much quicker and much more succinctly, making the whole process quicker than it would if they were using nothing but mundane tools. There's a lot of examples of little things like this. Farmland is another great example. They have entire nets and like posts that will basically make certain types of insects not able to get to the food, and yet beneficial insects that help with the soil are allowed in. They can do that kind of filtering with basically what are energy fields that are being magically projected. They can ensure that the dirt is being kept sufficiently strong so that if it floods, the dirt will not go down into a landslide. These are the kind of things. There's a lot of commodities and basic convenience features that the people have thanks to weaving. Weaving was originally introduced to challenge the players to be creative, and they were. It was actually really nice, but then none of the other campaign members have really been poking at weaving, and I'm okay with that. That's not a complaint, because the problem was, it was a great idea when used for the sake of creativity and fun. The moment it started to become more stat-based, it became very clear that weaving was very overpowered. I had to actually kind of revamp how weaving worked under the hood to explain why the world wasn't, super high tier in terms of power, which I can explain now to you. All these items are all woven, right? But the thing is, anyone who weaves, anyone who is trained in... First of all, training in weaving takes forever. Kind of similar to how training in magic takes. Anyone can learn it, as long as you have, the skill, the determination, the money, etc. But the time, the devotion, but there aren't. So weaving is very difficult to learn. If you want to learn it after the fact, you get to go to school for several years. You have a basic pool of what I call CXP, crafting exp. It is best expressed in lore terms as the amount of magic that you can tunnel through your body without it being deleterious to your existence. You can actually wear down your soul after a certain point. Now, the way this works is you can't actually keep weaving. You can't just go ahead and reduce your soul to nothing by keeping weaving. Your soul stops being able to transmit the magic. So you do have a finite cap, which is expressed by the CXP, even though the CXP is a positive resource, and this is actually being a negative resource, but it still equates out to being the same thing. And positive resources are usually easier for players to keep track of. In other words, keeping track of your health rather than the damage you've taken, to explain what I mean briefly. So CXP, you get some when you level, and there are a few other ways to get some. That's it. Once you're out, it's gone. So there is a finite amount of weaving that can happen, period. This is one of the reasons why so many colleges are constantly training new weavers, because there is a huge demand for woven items. Now, there's a couple snippets here. High-level weavers can do, basically if they roll high enough, they can choose not to burn crafting exp or to improve the product. And a lot of weavers, when they're making more mundane things, like a lot of things I just mentioned that are used in everyday life, like the lanterns or a signpost or whatnot, moving signs, chunks of stone that automatically sift dirt off of them, and that kind of help move the dirt off to the side into trenches so that the roads seem clean. This kind of stuff is very low-level magic. The way it actually works out is anything that is a stat boost or buff is considered high and very difficult weaving. Anything that buffs weaving itself is actually possible, but is ridiculously difficult. And then there's forms of weaving which are really, really, really just insanely powerful stuff, most of which involves magic technology, which I'm not going to talk about just yet. Just keep that in the back of your mind. But that's like the super high-level magic technology, or super high weaving, rather. So it is possible for a master weaver to go ahead and punch out, 50 of these lanterns and not cost him anything other than the time and investment to do so. You could probably see why this still creates a supply and demand situation, because most master weavers aren't going to be interested in churning out cookies. It's like going to a master chef and saying, can I have some mac and cheese? Or, or some oatmeal. I'd really like some oatmeal. They can do that. It's very easy for them. They're not going to be very motivated to do that, and they're not going to want to do that full time. So this is why there's a nearly constant influx of new weavers into the market, who then burn their exp and then retire from being weaving, or try to keep leveling and gain more crafting exp. It's a whole system, right? It balances itself out pretty well. I'm really happy with how it works, especially from a setting perspective. Technology, well, that's a little different. Now, let's be honest. The word technology, the definition I have always used for technology is the application of human innovation, or sentient innovation, if you prefer to not use the word human there. In other words, if I pick up a stick from the ground, I'm officially using technology, because I'm applying my innovation of the knowledge that this can be something I can use, right? Now, obviously there's various degree here, but I only mention that to explain the level of sophistication variance here. Technology can be used to overcome tremendous advantages. I've always believed that after a certain level, technology can actually surpass magic in some cases. For example, if you put, I don't know, something of a relatively low power level that is magical in real life, they'd probably be screwed. Why? Because we have access to insane technology, especially when it comes to offense and military application. We have cruise missiles. We have Vulcan Gatling cannons of doom and death. I mean, I'm just talking about two things right off the top of my head, for God's sakes. We actually have Gauss rifles now, and just all sorts of other horrible, horrible things. So, after a certain point, the technology catches up, but it obviously takes longer for technology to get there, and when you have such access to magic and weaving like this world does, well, there's no need to innovate technologically. It's, in a weird way, kind of similar to what happened in the Harry Potter setting. They have magic to do all the things that technology could do for them, so they don't bother with technology. No one's really bothered to innovate past the ability to smelt metal, and the wheel. They are very, very unadvanced, purely technology. The party has encountered several groups that are very advanced technologically, on like what I call the Star Trek level, basically. These include the enigmatic Viosians, which nobody actually really knows anything about, the Tumarok, the denizens of Aphis Lacelle, the Tuskers and the humans, and I think that's actually it. Check my memory for that. Yeah, that's it. So these are the people who have pure technology. In other words, what you would normally refer to as science fiction in a fantasy setting. These people have computers and machines, electronics, that kind of a thing, and use those in order to accomplish things basically analogous. For all intents and purposes, their technology is so advanced that they are equal to the magical might of the rest of the world, and in some cases surpass it. That's one of the reasons why there's such a threat in all of the above cases. I mean, the people of Aphis Lacelle were talking about the moon, going up and charting and possibly settling on the moon. Well, they actually have two moons, but you know the point. One of the moons. None of the magically inclined people have actually thought about that, because weaving and magic have not reached that point. See, it's not like it's a set thing. They're not just like this. Technology is better in some ways, magic is better in others, right? Now, this leads nicely into magic technology. Now, there's actually very, very few examples of this, but magic technology as its base is very easy to explain. All those advantages of technology with all the advantages of magic. Imagine a gun which is woven. Imagine that Vulcan cannon I mentioned earlier, which has magically enhanced bullets and magically enhanced targeting or whatever. You could do so much with magic technology. Now, there's a couple of tricks for that. First of all, it is ridiculously difficult to construct. In actual fact, none of the major races, none of the major factions of the world have ever actually invented magic technology. They have reverse engineered magic technology or been handed the blueprints, basically, and said, here, make this. And even then, it's usually difficult. Two big examples of magic technology right off the top of my head are airships and the mag lancers. Now, I'll talk about those in that order. Airships are the purest example of magic technology. They are functional ships that are, I guess Magitek trawlers are another example of this. Yeah, those are more woven than tech. But anyways, the airships are, I don't even know how to describe them. I've actually put a lot of thought into the airships. They have scanning technology, which is based on a combination of good old-fashioned radar and the magic of scan and the ability to scan things. They have weapons that can push forth magical energy, which has been propelled by technological force. So, you know, it can do a tremendous amount of damage. They have the ability to change their heights. In some cases, they have the ability to move through the earth with the sand ship that we've seen already. And Lord help the party if they ever encounter those things again, because they're still out there. I know exactly where they are. I know where every sand ship in the setting is right now. And they have... they basically have every feature you could think of. I forgive me for summarizing, but I don't even know where to start with airships. They are self-contained. They have a magical barrier, which is basically maintaining their own atmosphere. So technically, under the right circumstances, an airship could theoretically go into space. It would be very, very difficult to do, and they're not really designed to do that. But I mean, if it could get there, if it could surpass the obstacles that are in the way, it could actually get into space and survive out there because of the self-contained environment. Most airships are only as maneuverable as they are because they are using magic to break physics. But the technology itself is usually what's moving the ship. Most airships also have tremendously huge cores, usually made out of lacite or magicite, depending on the airship make and malfunction, or function, excuse me, not malfunction. I suppose this is a good time to talk about magicite. I've mentioned before, somewhere, I think it was last week's episode, or it was the week when I was talking about golems, that certain materials are more conductive to magic than others. Nothing is more conductive to magic than Pyrial. Pyrial is a substance that is like, it's the most conductive thing to magic there is. I don't really have a good analogy for that. And it is what all of the really best woven stuff, including the understructure of a lot of airships are made of. An airship may have like steel or titanium plating or whatever kind of armor on it and all that stuff, but underneath that, in the walls, there are magicite lines, literal, I'd call them cables, but it's more like, you know, plates of Pyrial that have been built into the wall so that they can conduct the magic necessary to keep the thing running, to have things like, they have comm units. They actually have internal comm units. They have internal scanners. They have doors that can open on their own. They have the ability to create water in order to be produced. They have the ability to deconstruct water and just push it out as steam. You know, all of this stuff is because of all these Pyrial devices, which are woven and then have the magic pushing through them. But magicite, that is the source of the magical power. That's the battery. It's the simplest way I can put it. Magicite is a battery of magical power. Now, magicite will naturally grow on its own. In fact, if it keeps growing, theoretically, magicite would eventually cover the entire planet Tiberian style. We're nowhere near that. We're not even the tiniest bit near that. It doesn't grow nearly that fast or that violently. What it does, though, is it grows more the more of it is there around. So people over the years have kind of found a pattern of basically harvesting a chunk of a magicite vein to a certain point so that it still has enough to grow, not too fast, but not too slowly, so then they can go to another vein, and when they go back to this vein, it will be back to the point where they can harvest it. So they have what is effectively an infinite source of magicite. It's time-based. Make sense? But like I said, magicite is the power source. It is literally a clear well, not clear. It's not perfectly clear, but it's like a translucent stone, which is warm to the touch, and usually kind of has some kind of various colors, which you can see through it, like a prism kind of a thing. And it provides magical power for all these devices. Some woven items don't need magicite. Most do. Most need some kind of magical energy continually flowing into the device to keep it functioning. And again, airships are the best example of this. They have cores of magicite that are larger than the room I'm in, just solid chunks of magicite, bigger than this entire room. Just powering the whole thing and keeping it going. And they need to swap those out every few years because they will run those dry. When magicite runs dry, it basically becomes a worthless crystal and will actually break down into dust very, very quickly thereafter. Not that most people are fully aware of this, but this is something that's known in setting. That dust, if maintained, will eventually erase into nothing. It will literally de-exist once it has been expended. There's some significance to that, but I'm not going to get into that now. So yeah, that's what powers the ships. And it's probably obvious why magicite ships, why airships need such ridiculous power sources. Airships have never been used in wartime before, since there's never been such a thing as wartime before. And the party and the viewers are aware of this. Airships weren't used for anti-airship combat back when they were first invented by the Scions, because why would they need to be? They were literally designed not to have to deal with that. And the viewers and the players are also aware of the fact that there's a flaw in airships. If a certain type of sufficient energy cracks the core, one of those engine cores I mentioned, of an airship, it basically creates a very, very, very powerful outburst of pure magical energy, which is, for all intents and purposes, a nuclear explosion. A Puron nuke. And in some ways it's actually worse than a nuke. It will literally vibrate titanium into dust. I actually described one of these events already. Yeah, because it's happened once. You might be like, well, how would they do that? Well, see, the Scions knew about that flaw. They just didn't care. Why would they? What possible reason would they have to care about that? They own the whole world. The airships were designed as ways for them to get around. The defensive capabilities was just for the creatures they couldn't control, and as a way to flaunt their power. That's it. In fact, most psionic airships actually had less offensive power than most modern airships do. Fun little fact. So when the airship design was granted from the Scions, I should say for the Darakost, gifted the airship designs to the Osteth Republic and to the brilliant engineers there, the Lugians, the Mites, and the Gnomes, who had always been very good at functioning as engineers for the Scions, which is why they were the natural choice. Those new airships were still designed with those same flaws in mind because they didn't actually understand what they were making, basically. And that's kind of the problem with magic technology. Again, nobody's invented it in the modern era. They've just been handed the blueprints or reverse engineered it. So they have no idea what they're actually making or really how it works. They barely know how to maintain these things. Most of that maintenance actually has to be done by lycanthropes. So that's a problem too. That, I suppose, is a good time to switch over to talk about Mag Lancers. Mag Lancers are Magitek guns. They're the only real form of guns that exist in the setting, especially since the very concept of a gun is way past these incredibly technologically primitive people. I suppose I should point out that there is such a thing as artillery because the Tumorok use that. And, the technologically advanced people groups tend to have things that are equivalent to guns. But for everyone else, the very idea of a gun is a complete unknown. It's like saying, yeah, I've got a Blufferflaun. You have no idea what that means, right? And it shoots, elephants and bananas. That sounds kind of cool. I think I might add that to Primus now. But anyways, Mag Lancers are a little bit different than airships. Now, airships can be, just about anyone can run them, but and you've probably heard me say this a few times, it takes training and diligence, blah, blah, blah. In other words, technically anyone could learn how to be a crew member on an airship. Realistically, very few people actually get good enough to be a crew on an airship. It is considered a huge thing to be a crew on an airship. There's actually a lore and flavor thing about this, which I've never gotten to explain, so I'm only going to mention it briefly here. If you guys want me to talk about it, feel free to drop me a question about it in the future. But basically, you know how in other settings, adventurers are like the celebrities of that? In this setting, it's actually sailors. Seriously. But, again. So airships are like the super celebrities of those. Airship crew, I mean. But Mag Lancers are a little different, because a Mag Lancer basically pulls from your soul in order to function, in order to magically augment the technology, and the technology will not function without the magic which is powering it. These are items that were reverse engineered by old artifacts, which actually were not psionic, but whatever. That's not a huge spoiler. Most people, everyone who looked into it, it looks different than the Ancients' style. It doesn't seem like their particular shtick when it comes to design or function. But so your soul has to power the magic of the gun, and the magic of the gun helps keep the technology of it functioning, and also alters its effect. Mag Lancers are inherently tied to the person who used them. Most people who get a Mag Lancer, they never change it. They never use a different one. They generally never have to. Mag Lancers are very powerful and can do a lot of different effects. How many, you say? If you can think of it, and it's within reason, it can probably do that effect. Now, if you want to start shooting stars out of the sky, then you're in the wrong campaign. Go away. There's a Warhammer 40k one over there, just for you. But if you want to shoot a particular type of elemental energy, if you want to shoot something that specifically disrupts the ground, if you want to shoot something that levitates someone for a moment, if you want to shoot someone that does a lot of concussive force, if you want to shoot something that pushes them back, if you want to shoot something that pulls them forward, if you want to shoot something that causes them to be dazed for a bit, if you want to shoot something that causes them to go blind, etc., 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 etc. A little more mundane, but, if you can think of it and it's within reason, I'll probably allow it. And those effects are basically at-will swaps because of your soul and how you're projecting that energy through the magicite core of that thing, of that Mag Lancer. Now, that in gameplay terms, that means you have a really powerful gun, takes a full turn action to change the type of ammo it uses, for lack of a better term, and then you start firing it, and it's insane. They also have a very high chance to hit. You might be like, well, why doesn't everyone have Mag Lancers? Well, if you're not paying attention, these things are stupid expensive to get a hold of. The party's encountered exactly one Lancer in the entire campaign. I actually came up with a prestige class specifically for Mag Lancers, whose only focus is using Mag Lancers. In fact, the only way to dual wield a Mag Lancer is to be that prestige class, to actually have two of them. That's the only possible way. It's the only way, because you have to specifically train your soul in a way that can deal with that kind of strain and that kind of discipline that's required to do that. And generally, you're only going to aim for that prestige class if you're going to do that. Now, normally I'd say anybody could do this, but this is not true in this case. Not anyone can wield a Mag Lancer. You could pick up the gun, but it's not going to do anything. It's a blunt weapon, for all intents and purposes, if you don't have that discipline and that training. And you have to specifically go to training in order to learn how to use the weapon, and even then it's not a sure bet of actually being able to succeed at it. And until you get used to it, every time you fire it, it may not actually function, and it may not do what you want it to do. If you succeed at all these things, though, a Mag Lancer is a damned dangerous weapon. It is effectively a Magitek cannon, which is also, by the way, one of the types of weapons that airships can employ, which also involves the same kind of problem for the people who actually run those things, which is why most of the airships the party has encountered have been using mundane cannons with magical augmentation behind them, not actually Magitek cannons, which are a totally different thing and much, much more horrible. I hope this is a good look at this. If you have any further questions on this subject, feel free to put it down below. I will read it and respond as I can. Otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and go on to the next one. See you around, guys.